My playthrough of Dredge started off like everyone else's. An angler looking for work, I am shipwrecked off the bay of an island called Greater Marrow. Luckily, a watchful lighthouse keeper spots me before I sink into the murky depths. All this is explained to me by the mayor, a curious man who strikes a deal with me. In exchange for fish to feed Greater Marrow citizens and a small interest taken to improve his town, he offers to provide me a ship. With no other means to make a living, I accept. With the deal struck, there is no time to waste. After familiarizing myself with my ship's navigation, I am ready to get to work. The first stop in my day is a small pocket of cod. While the fishing mechanics are initially tough, I am soon a master. With the cod depleted, it is time to continue moving. Luckily, I didn't have far to go and soon found myself in a school of blue mackerel. Ooh, we got a mackerel. There were more to come. Once again, it is time to move, and with only 4 hours of daylight left, I better move fast. Oh, a squid. A full live well means it's time to set sail home to Greater Marrow. I arrived back in Greater Marrow 2 hours before midnight. Just woke everyone up in the village. My first stop was the fishmonger, who shot down my efforts to make conversation. With the small talk out of the way, it was time to sell my catch. I was then approached by the mayor, who handed me a research component and told me to go visit the shipwright. Like the fishmonger, the shipwright treated my arrival to Greater Marrow with disinterest. She then told me that she could make improvements to my ship and patch up any damage caused by the sea or other things. You take on any damage from the rocks or ... any damage at all. What's that ... all about? But that was a question only experience could answer. I then spent my research component on the hydraulic rod because I like the idea of getting bigger catches. I'm a big catch man, baby. And then decided to rest until the morning. With the beginning of day 2, my attention turns immediately to the sea. I fished all day until I had a full live well, and even managed to snag my first trophy catch. Oh, trophy catch. I then retrieved a message in a bottle I saw floating nearby. In it, a woman recounted the second day of her honeymoon she spent sailing in the Marrows. All appeared to be going well. The husband had even planned her a surprise picnic. But the unknown fate of this couple overwhelmed me with feelings of dread and introspection. I gotta say, getting further out into the water is a scary thought. Open water is one of my greatest fears, if not my greatest fear. Despite these feelings, nighttime snuck up on me, and panic began to set in. I set sail for the nearest island and was grateful when I finally made it to its docks. But the island would not do. With no inhabitants and a live well stocked with fish that were growing stale by the minute, I could not afford to spend a night sheltered in Blackstone's docks. Yeah, so that's the lighthouse there. I think we can make that. Despite my high levels of panic and electrical setbacks along the way. Oh, great. I managed to make it to Greater Marrow safely, and even picked up a friend as I docked. But I was tired and would think about this in the morning. Lucky for me, a local took the opportunity to introduce herself. I couldn't tell if it was her warm welcome, the bright lantern shining in my eyes, or the 24 hours I had spent without sleep that left me feeling uneasy. But I wasn't going to let these questions stop me from my task, so I went and visited the fishmonger, sold my fish, was told by the mayor that it looked like I hadn't slept in a while. There's something off about this mayor. Purchased a weighted line from the shipwright, had it installed, and then went to sleep. The third day followed similarly to the one prior, except with more purpose. The fishmonger last night had requested my help in fulfilling an order of gulf flounder and grey eel for a Greater Marrow citizen. With money as an incentive, I jumped at the opportunity, and within no time, I had acquired both. Maybe this will be the eel? Certainly looks like it could be. With the flounder and eel caught, the order was complete, but it was too early to head home, so I set sail for a message in a bottle I saw floating off the cove. Its contents confirmed my fears of the sea surrounding the Marrows, as its author, who I assumed to be the wife from earlier, recounted their experience being nearly shipwrecked by a rock that appeared out of nowhere. Thoroughly spooked, I decided to turn in for the day. Back in Greater Marrow, I turned in the order to the fishmonger for $44 and picked up another order for a black grouper and 2 squid, the latter of which I was told only feed at night. I was then visited once again by the mayor, who handed me a mysterious package and asked me to deliver it ASAP to the dock worker in Little Marrow so its contents didn't spoil. Despite the time of day, I decided to brave the trip. What's me going here, eh? What is that? That'd be eastbound? I think we can probably make that trip. I feel like it's safe in here, but I also feel like that's what the game wants you to think. For the moment, the channel between the Marrows was safe, and I arrived in Little Marrow a little before 4 in the morning. At the docks, I delivered the package to the dock worker, who carefully hid its contents from my view. He then commented on its freshness and handed me what I assumed to be hush money for my discretion, but my curiosity remained piqued. So I wonder what the mayor and this hooligan are trading back and forth. But the newness of Little Marrow put such questions to the side for now. I then visited Little Marrow's local trader, who offered to buy any special trinkets I found out at sea for a fair price. With nothing to sell, I left to catch up on some much-needed rest. On day 5, I had one simple aim. Alright, let's get busy. We need to make some moolah. Some flounder and cod were the targets of my endeavor, and soon my live well was filling up with both. I even managed to hook my first unique fish, all-seeing cod, and turned into Greater Marrow early to see what price I could fetch for it from the fishmonger. While the all-seeing cod wasn't worth as much as I was hoping for, it contained a patterned handkerchief that puzzled both myself and the fishmonger. I then sold my catch and continued back to my ship, where I noticed a stranger peeking in at me through my cabin's window. The stranger explained to me that he knew secrets about the handkerchief the fishmonger had extracted from the all-seeing cod, and asked me to visit him on Blackstone Isle for more information. Despite the unanswered questions, the stranger left. So we have to go meet this mysterious man who was inside our ship? There was plenty of daylight left, and so I set off to Blackstone Isle. I arrived to Blackstone Isle just after dusk, and approached the man standing in the abandoned mansion. He told me that of all things first, he was a collector, who had interest in items like the handkerchief for their believed supernatural power. The man then requested my help in finding 5 more items: a ring, a necklace, a watch, a music box, and a key, promising rewards for my cooperation. While I was suspicious of the man's intentions with these items, I reluctantly agreed. After my conversation with the mysterious man, I headed back to Greater Marrow, having a close call with a rock along the way. Whoa. I shrugged off the unusual red mist circling my boat as nothing to worry about, and decided instead to fish for some squid. I even managed to catch my first snag squid. Back in Greater Marrow, the mayor told me that due to my efforts alone, the town was growing. Because of this, he had even commissioned the shipwright to install a dry docks, where I could make further improvements to my ship. I then visited the fishmonger, where I insisted that the order was for 2 arrow squid and a gulf flounder, not a black grouper. He wasn't buying it, so I sold my catch and left. The mayor then stopped by once more to chat, and by this point I was convinced he had a sick fetish for annoying me with small talk. Still, he thought I might introduce myself to the photographer south of the Marrows, and I agreed. It was then over to the shipwright, who told me I would need materials dredged up from shipwrecks to make improvements at the dry docks. For now, I had no materials to my name, so I bought and installed a hydraulic rod instead. Afterwards, I visited the lighthouse keeper and asked about any shipwrecks in the area I should know about. She told me that there was one such spot behind Greater Marrow where the sea brings in the flotsam of unlucky sailors. Of course, it wouldn't be a conversation with the lighthouse keeper without some cryptic comment. This time, she questioned whether or not I was even real. Yeah, let's get away from her. I then rounded out the day by talking to a woman who wanted out of Greater Marrow. To be honest, I couldn't blame her. She offered to pay me if I supplied lumber and metal scraps to an island north of Greater Marrow called Steel Point, so I agreed to help. I also finally noticed that I had collected books during my travels and chose to read one titled Sustainable Fishing during my free time out at sea. And with this discovery, day 6 ended. I meant to focus days 7 and 8 on catching fish for money and collecting materials for quest lines and upgrades. But little did I know the sea had other plans. My troubles began when I decided to push my luck and dredge up some jewelry shipwrecked near Little Marrow. By this point, I had a cargo full of fish and dredge, prompting me to begin the short voyage back to Greater Marrow. However, along the way I became distracted once again by a rare squid spawn and pushed my luck a little further, missing all the signs of the danger lurking in the channel. Whoa. What? Despite this close call, I narrowly made it back to Greater Marrow in one piece, but lost my bronze whaler along the way. Oh no. No, I lost the whaler. My money-making scheme was a flop, making a measly $15.81, which didn't even cover the cost of my ship's repairs. I don't have any money for any repairs. I went to sleep dejected, hoping that daylight would restore my spirits. I spent day 8 making up for the errors of day 7, fishing and dredging in the channel between the Marrows to some success. I caught some mackerel, a cod, and a bronze whaler, turning into Little Marrow to sell the pearl earrings I had found to the trader and store my fish to make room for more dredging along the voyage back to Greater Marrow. But efforts to prevent another close encounter like the one the night before split my attention between scouting, fishing, and sailing, a balance I failed to manage. Oh my god, I got distracted. So it was back, once again, to dredging up wooden planks and fishing up squid before turning into Greater Marrow. I also noticed this rock for the first time, and I'm pretty sure this related to my maxed out panic levels. Over at the fishmonger's, I was pleased to discover a hotkey to sell all my fish at once, and also embarrassed to not have noticed it until now. I used the money I had earned to repair my ship and was left with a whopping $102, roughly $95 more than I had started my money-making scheme with 2 days ago. It wasn't a complete failure, however, since I had collected enough materials to supply the woman's project at Steel Point. I finished making preparations for the trip before going to sleep. At the break of dawn on day 9, I began my voyage north to Steel Point. We're gonna go north and we're gonna drop off this steel for this woman. By noon, I was pulling into Steel Point's docks. I dropped off the metal scraps and wooden planks at the build site, growing tired as I worked. So much so, in fact, that by 1 p.m. I decided to turn in for the day. Day 10 began and it was time to get back to work. I dredged up some bundles of cloth from a shipwreck near Steel Point's docks. Oh, it all went downhill so fast. Spotted my first sailfish. Whoa, what is this? Saw my first dolphins. Dolphins? And caught my first sailfish. Damn it. I then sailed to an archipelago west of Steel Point where I spotted a courier's boat. Pulling up alongside the boat, I could tell something was wrong. I called out to be received by a courier hiding in the boat's cabin. He explained to me that he had instructions to deliver a package to Little Marrow, but had gotten cold feet after spotting a leviathan hungrily lurking beneath his boat. It was clear the courier wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, so I offered to deliver the package to Little Marrow for him. The package reminded me of the one I had delivered to the dock worker on the mayor's behalf earlier, but for a potential reward, I was anyone's dog for a bone. Still, in light of my experiences the nights before, the courier's warnings shook me to my core. Okay, let's not get greedy because we are a ways away. I wonder if it would almost be smarter to cross to this dock. Yeah, this is bad. This is really bad. But my curiosity was a pesky beast, and I soon invited another run-in with the ghost ship. What? What? Wow, dude. I'm shaking in my boots. Jeez, that was no ship. It was a goddamn monster. But there was no time to cower at Steel Point like the courier. I had a package to deliver. I spent most of day 11 sailing the coast of the islands around Steel Point, retrieving dredge and scavenging the remains of a shipwreck before turning in to Little Marrow. Those the scraps I left her? It must be. What's going on over here? We should be able to cross this by 6 o'clock, I think. I mean, that was pretty impressive, right? Give this video a like if you found that impressive. Back in Little Marrow, I sold the pearl earrings I had found to the trader and had this tidbit of insight after deliberating over what the anglerfish disguised as the ghost ship might mean. So is this game trying to say, like, I'm the monster? I then spoke to a grieving father. The father told me that he had lost his son to the sea many years ago. Noticing the dredging equipment on my boat, he asked if I would keep my eyes out for a bronze belt buckle that belonged to his son while I was out at sea, to which I agreed. He also told me that the old mare went crazy in his final days, shouting, "Throw it back," while tossing things into the sea. Oh, you were kind of a drag. I then visited Little Marrow's local hooligan and gave him the courier's package. This time, he didn't even pay me before scurrying off. Done with business in Little Marrow, I turned back towards Greater Marrow just after dusk. Of course, it wouldn't be a trip across this channel without inviting trouble along the way. This time, my death wish went unanswered, and I struggled to hide my disappointment. I'm dancing with fire, playing with fire. I sold my sailfish to the fishmonger and then told the woman that I had delivered the materials she had requested to Steel Point. She was ready to leave Greater Marrow right away, so she hopped aboard my ship. For my amusement, I stowed her away upside down, which I thought was funny. At 5 a.m. on day 12, the builder and I set off for Steel Point, but I was a fishing boat, not a ferry, so I still stopped to catch a whaler along the way. We arrived to Steel Point shortly before noon, and the woman was quite pleased with my work. So much so that she gave me 2 research components. I used these to research twin prop engines. I also began reading Getting Over It with Mind and Body, and then set off back to Greater Marrow, catching mackerel and squid along the way. As was becoming the routine, I sold my fish and looked at parts and upgrades I couldn't afford. There it is right there, $450. Before going to sleep. I devoted day 13 to money making, catching cod and mackerel while daydreaming about the twin prop engine. It's really gonna help when we can get this boat moving a little bit faster. Help with how fast the days go. We might even start exploring some more, daring to venture into the dark. Oh boy, what is this ugly thing? Because I didn't want to go any further with that ugly thing in my storage, I turned into Greater Marrow, sold my catch, before buying and installing the twin prop engines. I then decided to turn in early for the night. Like day 13, I spent day 14 catching fish around Greater Marrow to earn enough money to buy a light bulb from the shipwright. Yes, that's right, day 14 was all for a light bulb. Day 15 was more eventful. For one thing, I was now cutting through the sea, so I decided to go check in on an old friend. Steel Point is that island north that woman moved to. So maybe go see what she's gotten herself up to. I pulled in 2 lunkers and made it to Steel Point by 10:30, shaving off an hour and a half from the trip with my new engines. The woman proved to be quite the busybody, building a home in just 3 days. She thanked me again for my help, giving me a book and offering me her docks whenever I was in the area. On the way back to Greater Marrow, I filled the room in my cargo, dredging for a goblet and some wood, and even managed to find a research part. It also seemed like I had finally learned my lesson about messing around at night. I'll mess around with the foghorn right now, okay? I was back in Greater Marrow by 10 p.m., and with the 131 gold fetch from the whalers, I upgraded my trawl net, despite not owning one yet. I don't have a net yet, though. I then checked my progression through Getting Over It with Mind and Body and discovered it was a tough read. With that, day 15 ended. Day 16 began with a rocky start. Let's conserve some day and cross right now. Oh, that was... You get it now? A rocky start? Ugh, you hate to see that mistake. I fished a little on my way to Little Marrow to sell the goblet and continued to upgrade the trawl net I didn't own, before fishing some more on my way back to Greater Marrow. Oh, I also finally figured out the name of the town I had been frequenting. Okay, so I guess let's find out what this city's called. Greater Marrow, okay. And was still short on the cost of the net, so I rested until dawn. Day 17 was a mixed bag of dredging, fishing, and then dredging some more. I also took advantage of the builder's offer to use her docks at Steel Point before turning in just before midnight. After a 3-hour nap, day 18 began. I put another research part towards an engine upgrade before embarking on an early morning voyage back to Greater Marrow. With trouble close by, I'd have to move quietly. He's going pretty fast. Do we go for it? I think we do. Despite a close call... Oh, that's worst case Ontario right there. I made it back to Greater Marrow safely and even avoided an accident I was becoming known for. Oh boy. By now, it should also come as no surprise that I didn't have enough to buy the trawl net. So it was back out to sea where I spent the remainder of day 18 fishing and dredging. I also won Dredge's lesser-known minigame, making use of every slot in the cargo hold, a feat that had me bubbling with joy. Pretty good catch there. I showed off my boatsmanship to Greater Marrow citizens, who were undeniably impressed, before visiting the fishmonger for our daily trade. And with that, day 18 came to a close. Day 19 was nothing extraordinary. I caught 2 whalers and did some dredging. I did, however, find a citron ring, which I thought by its looks would be worth a pretty penny. During the evening trip back to Greater Marrow, I could tell the trawl net I had worked so hard for was within reach. And I was right. After selling the whalers, I finally had enough. Oh, the citron ring was also worth jack shit. At the start of day 20, I decided to make good on the promise I made to the grieving father. I combed the northeastern shoreline of Little Marrow for his son's shipwreck, doing some fishing along the way. Shortly after noon, I had retrieved the belt buckle. With plenty of daylight left, I hurried back to Little Marrow to return the belt buckle to the father. For my help, he gave me a research part. I then spent the remainder of day 20 fishing for mackerel and upgrading my ship's lights, engines, and rods with the materials I had collected. With my sights set southeast towards Gale Cliffs, day 21 began. I started reading The Engineer's Companion and tested my trawl net along the 8-hour voyage, snagging 1 fish with it. By 1 o'clock, I arrived to Gale Cliffs. I introduced myself to a traveling merchant who had set up a market in dockyards on the northern coast. Like the mayor, the merchant also mentioned that the photographer had set up camp somewhere between the Marrows and Gale Cliffs, and I made a note to pay her a visit. I also noticed that the merchant sold crab pots, but for the moment, I had little interest in crustaceans. I then fetched a message in a bottle from the middle of the bay and learned that the waterspouts damaged my ship. Of course they do. A lucky pull while dredging earned me a research part, which I went to go spend on my next engine upgrade before learning that I had immediately sent it spiraling overboard after crashing into a rock. I spotted a rare fish spawn and decided now was as good of a time as ever to fish. I caught a black sea bass in my net before fishing for some blackmouth salmon. Day 21 concluded with a conversation between myself and a hermit who lived in an abandoned town adjacent to the cliff's entrance. Observing the town's state and its proximity to the looming cliffs, I asked the hermit why he chose to live here and not in Ingfell, the nearby town. To my inquiries, the hermit confessed that he had been reconsidering his residence lately. I offered to help him move, but he explained that it was not so simple. See, in his youth, the hermit had disagreed with his brother over how to split their family inheritance, creating a rift between the siblings that grew when the hermit stole away with the family crest here to the ruined town. But the problem got worse. During the town's collapse, the family crest became one of many possessions dragged back to the burrows of the monster that lived within the cliffs. If the hermit and his brother were to make amends, I would need to brave the cliffs and the monster within. So of course, I agreed to help. Rain announced day 22, and an unwelcomed visit made it one to remember. I crossed the bay early in the morning and sold yesterday's catch to the merchant. I then paid a visit to Ingfell, where I introduced myself to a local who requested I bring her a rotting conger eel, aged, as she called it. She continued to tell me that this type of eel hides within the holes and burrows of cliffs, only leaving at night to feed. For now, this didn't seem like a problem, so I agreed to indulge her questionable appetite. I spent the next few hours dredging and fishing, catching my first tiger mackerel and oceanic perch, the second of these two introducing with it a new minigame, before venturing into the cliffs from its western entrance. Inside, some dredge in the passage beneath the jutted-out rock caught my attention, but a rock slide prevented me from punching the one-way ticket my curiosity had nearly handed me.
Excuse me? What?
After one lap around Ingfell, I shook the serpent from my tail and docked. I met the hermit's brother, who did indeed still hold a grudge, before turning in for the night. Though I was happy to see the day end, my business in Gale Cliffs had become infinitely more complicated. I devoted the next 2 days to the typical busy work. I made the short trip from Ingfell to the floating dock early in the morning of day 23 to complete my last upgrade and unlock the new hull before fishing for salmon, mackerel, and perch to make enough money to buy a research part. On day 24, I fished some more, discovered a line of rocks blocking the cliff's thoroughfare, dredged up a silver trinket, and spent a research part on the next engine upgrade. With the close encounter with the sea serpent still on my mind, I woke up on day 25 and chose violence, a decision I soon regretted. I think we try to go through Mr. Leviathan's secret abode. Oh my god, what? Oh, big mistake going through here. After a short chase, the sea snake lost interest, allowing me to meander back into the cliffs. Though I suffered some damage in the process, I pulled in a bag of doubloons from a shipwreck in the first chamber of the cliffs, but without a trader nearby, all I could do was store my loot and dream about the payout that awaited me in Little Marrow. Day 26 was a bit of a write-off. I left the floating dock early in the morning and sailed along the northern side of Gale Cliffs. Soon, I came across an opening into the cliffs, but was more interested in the rare fish spawn that sat directly in its mouth. Without a hydraulic rod equipped, however, I wasn't fishing here anytime soon, so I sailed back to the floating docks and equipped one in place of my trawl net. By this time, it was past noon and my fresh start hadn't paid off, so I put head to pillow and told myself tomorrow would be different. On day 27, I caught some blackmouth salmon and reeled in some sturgeon in yesterday's spot. I was pleased to sell my catch for roughly a $200 profit, which landed me enough coin to purchase the final research part needed for the twin jet drive engine. I did have to check my excitement for the minute though, since I was still $400 shy of the $500 needed for the engines. I can't remember if it was the last few days I had spent sailing around Gale Cliffs without hiccup or my anticipation for the new engines that lowered my guard on day 28, but the lesson of the day I swore never to forget. As was becoming my routine, I woke up before dawn and sailed the northern shores of Gale Cliffs. By first light, I sat before the cliff's middle passage, partly sheltered from the rain by its arching rocks. For the moment, I decided against exploring any further, turning away to do some dredging and missing the trembles signaling an awakened friend. Oh! With my engines disabled by the sea snake's attack, I made the tiring row back to the floating dock, keeping a lookout for the second strike I would be powerless to avoid. We might end up as some dredge soon. By luck of the sea, I made it back to the dock safely before dusk, and even had enough money saved to repair my engines before turning in for the night. On day 29, I decided to be proactive, fishing to earn some money for a rainy day fund in case of any more run-ins with the sea snake. I also organized my storage. Day 30 began with me touching and getting rejected by a rock. I then fished for some sturgeon before narrowly avoiding another run-in with the sea snake. Yeah, like where did you come from? I have to admit, for his size, he was surprisingly nimble. You can't thread this gap, I bet. Back at the floating dock, I sold the sturgeon I had caught and put the materials collected towards the hull upgrade before turning in early for the day. On day 31, I spotted my first orcas and caught around $100 worth of fish, landing me $35.16 shy of the new engine's upgrade. With the engines within reach, I began making plans on day 32 to retrieve the family crest from within the cliffs. So the family crest is in the cliffs. That's fantastic. Let's get this upgrade and then we'll think about getting the family crest. Jeez, everything seems to be at the bottom of the sea. I caught as much salmon as my cargo would hold and filled the remaining gaps with perch. By 7 at night, it had all the makings of a successful day. I sold my fish to the merchant and bought the new engines with some change to spare. Drunk on excitement, my failure to plan ahead smacked me sober when it became clear that I'd need a new hull before installing the engines. Though in my heart I now knew the engines were many days away, I held out hope that there was some combination of rotations and squares that I had missed. There wasn't, so I checked what materials I was missing for the hull upgrade and went to bed. Day 33 came and went. I left the floating docks early and was coasting into the cliffs by 8 a.m. I avoided a run-in with the sea snake before dredging up 2 bundles of cloth needed for the hull upgrade and a research part. Of course, it wouldn't be a typical day of mine without crashing into a rock, damage I repaired at the floating docks before going to sleep. I started day 34 by putting the cloth from yesterday towards the hull upgrade before fishing for salmon, sturgeon, and mackerel. I also won the dredge minigame and got $255 for my efforts. I then spotted a rare fish spawn, so I installed my shallows rod and pulled in my first direct fish. It was also time to start a new book, The Relaxed Mind. On day 35, I charted a course for a sailfish spawn between Gale Cliffs and the Marrows. Along the way, I spotted a breaching blue whale, which was probably the most magical moment I had this far. I followed my new friend for a little before reeling in a sallow sailfish that sold for $368. Money I used to buy the refined metal needed for my hull upgrade. Day 36 arrived and I decided to pay the photographer a visit. I caught my new favorite fish during the westward voyage to her island. Once there, the photographer explained how she had landed herself in a predicament. On her way from Stellar Basin, she mistakenly crashed into coral when she heard a disturbance in the water behind her, sending a set of lenses overboard, a feeling I was all too familiar with. Because she needed these lenses for her work, she asked if I'd recover them and promised a camera as a reward. Remembering the moment with my great blue buddy earlier, I agreed to help. I rounded out the day by catching another wreckfish and selling the pair for $166. On day 37, I rose with the sun and dredged for some cloth. I also decided to finally brave the inner cliffs without my new engines. Inside, I found a scenic chamber and a dredging spot, and I knew the crest was near. Sure enough, it was, and I reeled it in quick before making my exit. On my way back to the floating docks, I found a rock with crab-like engravings that seemed to have a spot for an item. For now, I had nothing that would fit, so I made a note of it and left. I then added the last of the cloth to the hull upgrade and was now only missing 2 pieces of wood. On day 38, I reconciled 2 brothers. First, I returned the family crest to the hermit, who asked me to return it to his brother in Ingfell with the message that he'd like to come home. In Ingfell, the whaler agreed to put his brother up in his old workshop, but told me he needed some time to get the space in order. In the meantime, he asked if I'd detonate the rubble blocking the pathways through the cliffs. A strange request, I thought, for a retired whaler. Still, doing so would make navigating the cliffs much easier for myself, so I happily obliged to help. I also tried to sneak into the cliffs to get the materials I needed for the hull upgrade, but the sea snake wasn't taking any visitors. This wasn't really a problem since there was much safer places to go looking. Besides, it was nice to see a family feud end.